Welcome to Salon Talks. I am Mary Elizabeth Williams, and maybe you first got to know this guy as the Naked Chef, but today Jamie Oliver is an Emmy and BAFTA award-winning television host, a best-selling author, and an advocate. His newest book and series are called One Simple One Pan Wonders. I love this book, Jamie. I love it. It's so great. It's everything that I love about your cookbooks. It's easy, it's accessible, and the recipes are delicious. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a lovely compliment, and I'm really grateful that you love it as much as I do.
It's beautiful. Now, this book, this is kind of your third project to come out of the pandemic as a
Mm,
response to it. And this one was particularly written in response to the 2021 UK lockdown.
yeah.
Tell me about a little of the inspiration for this book.
Well, I think during lockdown, it was a little bit of an opportunity to really look at what are people buying, what are they buying most of the time, and kind of using that information to arm me with the inspiration to write maybe slightly differently. I wanted to take away all the barriers to not cooking and ordering a takeaway. Like, how can I make it easy for you to cook? So there was a number of things that really made a massive difference. First of all, One Pound Wonders really should have been called the minimum washing up cookbook. People's hatred for cleanup is profound and it's big. And every time I mention it, you get people like cheering, "Yay, I hate it, drive me up the wall." So that's quite a powerful emotion that has nothing but everything to do with food. Then people's hatred for long shopping lists. They want to cook something, but they got to buy 20 things. And that's more common than you can imagine. So in this book, if you open in any page, you'll see there's pictures of every ingredient. So I'm really holding your hand and guiding you through the recipe. And we never, ever have more than 8 ingredients, 8 or less. And then from a nutrition point of view, I want to make it an everyday cookbook. So to do that, it can't just be full of indulgent kind of like heavy meals. So we've got beautiful indulgent meals in there, but just the right percentage of them. But we got loads of everyday healthy, delicious dishes. We celebrate meat, we celebrate fish, we've got veggie, we've got vegan, covering all the ranges from breakfast to dinner, and everything in the middle. So kind of that's all taken into consideration before I've even written one recipe. And then when it came to the recipes, I was really looking at the ingredients that you guys normally buy every week. So again, I don't really even want you to go shopping to cook one of the recipes. Like, I know that most people are buying chicken every week. So that's why there's a whole chapter dedicated to it. If you look at things like the 1 pan pastas, which is a really nice technique where you only need the 1 pan, you don't need the second pan. And, most of that is very doable in 8 to 10 minutes. So for those people getting back from work, just about to order a takeaway, and look, even a cheap takeaway is quite expensive. I'm very conscious that I just have to make it easy for people. And then, as you know, one of the most important things is testing the recipes so they actually work and deliver on the promise. So we take that really seriously.
I think a lot of us, as someone who doesn't have a dishwasher, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for writing this book, because the pan thing really is an obstacle for a lot of us, especially
Yeah.
when you're cooking for a family, if you're cooking for more than one or two. But I think a lot of us think that, okay, so the fewest number of pans is the way to go. But sometimes that can be an obstacle. There are challenges to cooking with one pan
Mm.
too. So I want to know, what are some things that you learned along the way to make one pan cooking easier for all of us and
Well,
adapting?
it is a beautiful world, obviously the conceit and the concept of cooking in 1 pan, washing up a side, is that whatever you're cooking is benefiting from other things that are around it in that environment. And obviously, if you're cooking in a pan, that's different than a kind of casserole pan, which is different than a Dutch oven, because they all hold moisture and hold heat in a different way. So for me, it was that was the easy part, but it was just putting combinations together. I mean, it was creating the laws and the rules of the book, so it was easy for you, the reader. But really, just picking, things that would work in that vessel. So whether it was a tray, which we've got kind of a whole bunch of roasting tray recipes that, you know, you've got everything cooking together and flavoring each other. But I guess some of the challenges are like you need to cut things or prep things so that they cook in the perfect time. Otherwise, you've got perfectly cooked meat, say, and then like raw veg, and that's not cool. So there's ways of getting around that, of course. But that aside, emotionally, I try and give you enough of what I know you want, and then give you enough or the right amount of what you don't know you want yet. And that's a real balance, and that's a real gray area. And I think, having been publishing for 25 years, like, I must be getting it roughly right. Otherwise, I'd have been sacked years ago. So, you know, I think, I think a good, well-written cookbook should be able to sort of connect with you on different levels. So from breakfast to dinner, you know, like there's a really humble recipe in the book, sort of driven by a reality of like, oh, I really want a toasty, like a cheese toasty, but I've got no bread. Damn. So I give you a recipe for like a 2-minute bread, you know, that you can knock out in the pan, and then you stuff it, and then you get that beautiful cheesy ooze, and you can put your combinations. So from a humble recipe like that, which is kind of almost not a recipe, it's like student food, which we all love, to, you know, we've got a 1-pan dish where I treat a pork belly, which is a much more affordable cut than some of the prime joints, and I treat it like a porchetta from Italy, and I cook this rolled pork belly rubbed with all these gorgeous things in this pan, and then as it's resting, we turn all the remnants and goodness from that pan into the most incredible risotto, and there's loads of veg in it, and it's kind of it's a complete meal, but it's also like it's almost good enough to be it's a dinner party meal, so it's got the wow effect. So from that cheese toasty to that dish and everything in the middle, like I think the job of the author is to try and give you a little rainbow of useful recipes that hopefully will connect with you at different times in the day.
Well, Jamie, it feels like because you have been at this a long time that you are really in conversation with your readers and your viewers about what they need and what they want. And I've heard you refer to some of your more recent cookbooks as solution-based cookbooks,
Yeah.
which I really, really appreciate as a home cook. And the solution may be ingredients, it may be time, it may be equipment, and it may also be money. And this book is also very intentionally, like many of your
Mm.
others, budget friendly. I want to ask you about what you are thinking of when you are developing these recipes in terms of what people are telling you budget friendly looks like. Obviously, you in the UK, we in the US have been hit very hard recently
Yeah.
economically.
It's a really good question. I mean, in the last recession, I did a cookery book called Save with Jamie, or Money Saving Meals. And the question of what is budget friendly is completely subjective, isn't it? And, you know, probably not for me to say, or most people to say. So I meandered around what does that mean? Like, who justifies what budget friendly means? And I just thought, well, if it's half the price of a Big Mac meal, you know, that's got to be nudging me in the right sort of direction, you know. So certainly in that book, that's what we intended to do. And in this book, we wanted to make sure that there was a really nice percentage of the book that was kind of in that sort of area, like when you're cooking for 4 people, if it's comparable to sort of like an easy takeaway, then you're probably in the right direction. We never expected everything that's happened, obviously, in the last year with Ukraine and bits and pieces like that, where the prices have gone completely bonkers. But, you know, again, when I'm writing my book, I genuinely, sincerely do try and look at health and nutrition. I try and look at choice. I try and like represent, you know, like veggie and vegan dishes in the right kind of proportions. Look at meat and meat reduction. So you'll see recipes in the book where we're helping you meat reduce. Because to think, oh, you know, vegan, veggie, or meat eater, it's this whole binary approach to making people's food preferences like a club or a religion or a kind of, do you know what I mean? I don't really like that bit, but I really like the idea of helping people go on a journey and improve and realize that meat reduction is really good on so many levels. Financially, it's amazing. We can replace that meat with like some incredibly nutrient dense veggies and legumes and stuff. Do you know what I mean? But in a really clever way, a delicious way, and also a way that really echoes back to hundreds of years ago where that was normal practice. So do you know what I mean? So it's not wacky and new. It's actually got its anchor in history. But yeah, I think again, it's just if I just did a cookbook full of prime cuts of meat and fillet steaks and foie gras and kind of really exclusive ingredients, that would be inappropriate and slightly audacious. And I think at the same time, like what I try and do in a very small percentage over the years and quite strategically is I start mentioning things like harissa or miso, which are little flavor bombs that have gone from being quite scarce and rare to ubiquitous around the country. Do you know what I mean? And like if you go to any American supermarket now, you can find miso like pretty easily in different colors and forms. And that's quite typical in a lot of countries. And so I feel like part of my job is to mention those things so the buyers in those supermarkets actually, because I just think one of the most joyful things about cooking is, you know, if you've got your salmon steak, which is very common, or your chicken, like you can go to any country in the world. And yeah, we've got our preferences that we love and that we grew up with, and God bless that. But like, you know, I've just come from doing Good Morning America, where we did a miso chicken with sweet potatoes and like sesame seeds and spring onions. And it's such a delicious, it's so delicious. Like the skin is crispy and the meat's falling off the bone, and that depth of umami and soy and the freshness of lime. Oh, I mean, so, you know, and I was giving it to the co-host, the presenter on that, and you could tell, like, you know, like those textures and flavors, you know, speak to you, even if you've never been to Japan.
And getting people excited about food and about cooking and realizing that it is within your grasp is so empowering. It's not about deprivation, it's not about cutting back, it's about what you're adding. And it feels like that's been a big part of your mission. I know you and your family were personally very affected by COVID. I want to know if that also changed how you cook for each other and how you care for each other.
Yeah, I mean, look, COVID was pretty awful for everyone. Jules got it quite bad and still has long COVID now. And I mean, I think, and we were also one of the first, we were the first non-news broadcast to go prime time with bespoke COVID content. You know, it took literally a month in Britain for unique content, which was tuned into the moment and the scenario, to come out. So we were really, really early, as in day one. We went to air in 16 hours. And the reason I mention that is because in the UK, we could only buy 80 items, like you know, and I was doing that like everyone else. So I was out of nowhere kind of self-commissioned a show that was a Monday to Friday primetime show that wasn't even commissioned the week before. And I went from teaching recipes to principles. And that was very interesting. So we could then open up the recipe, which would exclude people, and really amplify the principles, which includes people. And then throughout the week, I was using fractional bits of leftover stuff. You know, when you got stuff in the fridge and it's not quite enough for anything, but you know, so that was inspiring the recipes I was making. I was using the freezer, and, you know, by the day 5, things weren't looking as fresh as maybe you've seen them on my cookery shows before, where they're perfect. But I think maybe more importantly, like, because we were all vulnerable and it was those very early days and people were scared, like, so much was out of our control, but actually the one thing we could control was what we cooked. And yeah, cooking for the kids, cooking food that kind of by its nature made you feel comforted, and how you serve. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think definitely just little subtle words that you would use in presenting it because of the now, or let's say context or relevance. I think that's what made that series really, really special. And the response from the public was amazing. And even globally, it was like, thank you for doing this. because people were tuning in and had the same problems. So I think that, yeah, that was quite a unifying moment for me, actually, very powerful. And I did that for a month, and then decided, well, didn't decide. Once the rest of the industry had caught, it literally took a month for production to catch up in the UK and many other countries in the world. Then I started concentrating on my colleagues at work and making sure that we were all stable and happy.
Yeah, it's and I appreciate you mentioned the part about using leftovers, because a big part of cooking on a budget or cooking within your means using what you have. One of the, and I know you're a big advocate against food waste as well, and that's one
Yeah.
of the causes that you really care about. Obviously, one of the other causes that you talk about is, I think you say it's your other full-time job, is children's health and nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you've been very outspoken always in your career, particularly in the
Yeah.
last year, some of the things going on in your government. What are you focusing on now in terms of how we care for our kids, not just within our families, but on an institutional higher level? What would you like to see changed in your own country?
Oh, well, look, there's two ways you can answer that. Like, what needs to be done, or what are we concentrating on now to get done? Because we're very slow globally, and certainly in the UK and the US, we're very, very slow to progress true progress in protecting child health. So, how long have we been debating, you know, the laws around labeling and truth and transparency and where you would put the nutritional information? And, it wasn't that long ago when I did the ABC primetime show Food Revolution, where we outed pink slime, which the American government decided no one had to mention if it was less than 25% of the whole product. Like, you've had permission from the government to lie. So this is not in the best interest of truth, integrity, agriculture, and certainly not in the best interest for parents, and most definitely not in the interest of kids. So, and when we outed that story, the response from the American public was very visceral. Like, they never knew they didn't have truth. So I think even from labeling, we've still got a lot to do in the UK as well. It's not legislation to have to put nutritionals on the front and color code it so that a busy working parent can decide. It doesn't mean they're not going to take something that's indulgent. It just means that they know. And if they've got a trolley full of only reds and flashing reds, then that's probably worth thinking about when you go home that night and looking at some healthy little swaps. So there's loads to be done. I mean, I think if I had a magic wand, making sure that school food for our students, especially the most vulnerable, was as good as it can be and available for free for the ones that really need it. I think, I would love if every American child could leave at 16 knowing 10 basic recipes, to save their life, and know the basics of budgeting and nutrition, and how to be a ninja shopper in their neighborhood. Like, that feels not like a luxury kind of indulgent middle class kind of whim. That feels to me, for every American child, like that's kind of survival, right? That's kind of like Cub Scouts and kind of like, it feels like life. So, I mean, I think, generalizing massively, if you look at what's challenging our young families right now, in both of our countries, it's debt and health. So the cost of food annually is still very expensive. Being better at that is going to really make a difference, and knowing how you can duck and dive and look after the people you love is really useful. So I wish that could happen, but yeah, I think it still feels like fighting for truth, better food, fairer food. Kind of, you get the impression from the powers that be that it's a kind of an indulgence and not a right. I think it is a right. And the food industry is very powerful, and it wants to solve your solutions and charge you for it. And so, it's a lot of work to be done. But I think ultimately, if I mean, if you think about it, just keeping people cooking, that is a rarity now. We're cooking less now than we did before COVID. So I think everyone thought that we were cooking more in COVID, and that is true, but we were locked in our houses. We didn't have a choice. It was under duress. So, but seemingly now it's dropped off again.
Yeah, I want to thank you so much, Jamie, and I really appreciate it as a home cook and as a parent. I can't thank you enough for joining us today here at Salon.
Oh, thank you very much, and thanks for having me.